our guest today is Sheikh Ahmed Hanif, and we got up to the point where Sheikh Hanif made a very dramatic proclamation or announced the testimony or the acceptance, confession of the belief in Allah and the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, at this debate, where of all of these people who were, I could say you were their idol, and then you just turned your back on them.
Right.
Alhamdulillah. So this happened, and it's about 1980 or so. So we're talking 30 years or so ago. And as you mentioned, you stuck your finger out when you did your Shahadatain, because it was some Sunnah brothers who you took your Shahada with. But how did you then progress from being the Sunnah brother to becoming
a Shia?
Yeah.
Because of the Islamic Revolution, right? Because of the Islamic Revolution. What happened was, when the Islamic Revolution was victorious, you found like a huge propaganda offensive against Iran to put distance between the general Muslim population, that is the Sunni population, right, and Iran. And so you found in the newspapers and many publications that they tried to marginalize the Islamicity of Iran by claiming that they belong to just a marginal sect in Islam called Shiism. And that really a real Muslim is like what you find in Saudi Arabia. They got lots of oil, they have lots of money, they wear long white robes, and they just chill. They don't get into revolution and changing society and reforming society and so on. That's none of the business, So I was curious because I came from a revolutionary background myself.
Sure.
I was supportive of the Cuban Revolution, and I liked the Vietnamese Revolution and so on. And I would have liked to start a revolution myself, And I wanted to know, what is this Shiaism, So Shiaism, I researched Shiaism, I did not research Islam to become a Muslim. I became a Muslim purely by an encounter with Quran. Of course, after that, I read about Islam. But Shiaism, I did study like early Islamic history.
Okay.
And then I read about Banu Saqifa, how they stole the Khilafat from Imam Ali alayhi salam. I read about the wars. Our Sunni brothers don't really know about the wars that occurred between the companions. They see all of the companions as some equal, kind of one big, huge Barney family. Everybody's lali da 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 da. Everybody's cool with each other and so on. But they didn't know that companions were fighting wars between each other.
Yeah.
Where
were you getting your information from? Because again, back in the early, very early 80s, there was no such things.
Iran. I contacted the Iranian embassy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Shia sources, Shia brothers and so on. So I get information from them, but I would cross-reference with Sunni history.
Okay. So you actually knew some Shia brothers at the time?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I made connections with them because right after I became a Muslim, I joined the Islamic organization in our university.
Okay.
And alhamdulillah, this organization was run by a brother named Brother Uthman, who was a Sunni, but he was a person who believed in Islamic unity. And he loved Iran. In fact, he came to Iran and lived here for a number of years right after the revolution. Okay. And he was a translator for Ayatollah Rafsanjani at one time.
And he was a Sunni brother.
So this guy was holding down this organization as a Muslim organization and not as a sectarian organization. So I came into contact with Shias in this organization as well. And I'm sure, yes, they did influence me to some extent. I read about these things, and for example, the general Sunni response to, for example, the Battle of Al-Jamal would be, look, they're the companions, they're better than us, they're higher than us, we can't judge them. But hey, man, if this is Islam, you bring people into Islam by using logic, and then when you get into Islam, you say, don't use logic anymore? Right? If two guys are fighting, either both of them are wrong, or one is wrong and one is right. They can't be both right. They can't be on the same accord and be looking at, the universe and life and reality in the same way and fight each other. And Shiaism was much more, realistic about that. So I saw all of these things. I got to the Battle of Siffin, and saw the troubles of Imam Ali alayhi salam. and then I got to Karbala and so on, and it is there that my heart started to weep, and started to burn, and there I saw the seed of the Islamic Revolution. This is the source from which this Islamic Revolution came from. And by the time I got to Karbala, I knew what my choice was going to be. I was going to be a Shia. So I was a member of our dear brothers of the Ahlul Sunnah for 1 year, and then I became a Shia. And I've been so ever since.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
You say it as if, that you just want to make it clear that there was no contemplation of you turning back.
Some people ask me, right, well, you were a black nationalist, then you became a socialist, then you became a Sunni, now you became a Shia. What next?
Okay, right.
People tend to ask you that,
okay.
right? I tell them, look, man, if there's something next,
yes,
and it's for real,
yes,
right, and it can be verified,
yes,
I'll be it.
Yes.
But I haven't found anything in 30 years.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay? Maybe some aliens have to come from another planet and come down here and talk about somebody else, and he might just turn out to be a cousin of the Prophet. I don't know. But there's nothing else. Islam is the last religion for mankind.
Okay, so I get your point now. So this is how you kind of got in touch with Shiism, and alhamdulillah, as you said, once you heard the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I don't need to ask anymore. Really, you didn't really need to say anything after that. But for the benefit of our viewers, alhamdulillah. Would you say, looking at yourself now, looking at your life, these 30 years that you've been a Muslim, and who you were before, you mentioned some of the activities you used to get up to, would you say that you would consider the personality, if you like, Sheikh Ahmed of now and George of before?
No, George. Oh, come on. George is a terrible
George. What was it again?
That's an X.
I was trying to tweak it out, but inshallah, off camera, maybe I might have a bit more joy. Would you say that these two personalities are totally different? I.e., because you've become a Muslim now, you cannot see any connection between who you were before and now?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. When a lot of us reverts, when we look at our lives, we see certain elements in our quote-unquote non-Muslim past that are glimpses of our Muslim identity. For example, I used to party a lot, okay? And I used to drink alcohol, but I never liked it.
Right? You just did it
because because it was something that people did.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean, right? You have these stories among us, right? They have certain tendencies, that are glimpses into themselves. Now, you say, like, if, for example, your personality changes. Now, I think there's two aspects to your personality. I think there's your core personality, who you truly are, your own individuality, which is basically the shining forth of those combinations or expressions of the divine names that you have in yourself, right? And then you have something superimposed upon that by nurture, by a society.
Yes.
Which is something that is changeable. Even if you didn't become a Muslim, who you were before is not who you are now, based upon, you used to smoke before, but you don't smoke now, for example. These types of things, right? I think, yes, on the level of that superficial aspect, lots have changed, But in terms of my core, I don't think I've changed. In fact, my core has become more expressive. For example, let's say, I used to be very politically active. I used to be very active in DJing and bringing people together, right? I still do this, right? Because this is an expression of my core personality.
Sure.
It's expressed in one type of prison, whose value system I had accepted at the time. Okay. Now it's expressed in another kind of a prison. For example, I was looking at some of our gatherings for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And I remember, the majlis will start at 8 o'clock, let's say. Come 8 o'clock, there's only like 4 people in the hall, And I said to a person, this reminds me of when we used to book halls to have parties.
Sure.
The party was supposed to start at 11 o'clock, and there were only like 20 people in the hall.
Yeah, at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
That's when it starts getting...
You know what I mean, right? It's the same me. but it is being expressed according to different principles.
So now you're gathering people together for the remembrance of Allah.
Exactly. You know, our debate now in terms of defending Islamic principles,
yes,
you know, and Islamic policies and so forth and so on.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, so what would you say? I mean, again, I keep going back to this fact that, alhamdulillah, you've been a Muslim for 30 years, so you have a wealth of experience. You know, how can we best mesh the kind of culture that we live in? Because we're Westerners at the end of the day. We are Westerners. There's no getting away from it. And I think I've heard you mention before something very important. Maybe you could touch on that. You categorized Muslims into two types. I think you call them native Muslims and migrant Muslims or immigrant Muslims.
Yes.
And what I wanted to focus on was how best can we kind of mesh these two, the ideology, the kind of divine ideology of Islam and our Western culture.
Right. You know, Islam, to me, is like pure Islam. It's like distilled water. Okay? You can't drink distilled water. It'll kill you. You have to mix it with some salts. You have to mix it with some carbonates and so on for it to be able to be assimilated into your body. Okay? So basically, all the water that we see are sort of like mixtures with distilled water. Distilled water, river water, sea water, the water in a lake, you know, the water in that bottle that you drink, okay? The base of it is distilled water, you know, but it has certain characteristics that makes it, you know, make you call it sea water or lake water or river water and so on. Islam is like this, you know, it's pure Islam, but when it encounters Indonesian culture, it becomes Indonesian Islam, you know. And so a person, when it encounters African culture, it becomes African Islam, and Persian culture becomes Persian Islam, and so forth and so on, you know. And this makes it so beautiful. Just as we enjoy the foam that comes from the salt in seawater, you know, as it breaks upon the waves, upon the shore, you know. So we enjoy the different permutations and expressions through which Islam is presented. So we as Western Muslims are still in the process of expressing this, expressing our Western Islam. One of the biggest, I think, disservices of much of these immigrant Muslims, okay, is they insist, some of them, on expressing Islam or saying that Islam is in accordance to how they perceive it. I remember I went to a majlis about Imam Hussein in the embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran in South Africa, all right? And they had these groups of brothers doing a presentation of their, what they call Sinezani, their, you know, Matam, right? So you had a group of Pakistani brothers got together, you know, and they did their matam and they said their thing. Whoop, 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 and it was great, you know. Then the Iranian brothers came up, right, and it was great. And it was a difference between them and the Pakistani brothers, right? And then the South African brothers came. Now, you know, black people are like rhythm incarnated. So when they were doing their matam, they were also moving their feet. Okay? Okay, first of all, they gave them a short time. When they saw them moving their feet, it seemed too much like dancing. Okay? So they hurried them off, you know, and they got on with the show. The second time around, when the other groups were also invited to come up and do it once more, they didn't call these guys. You're in South Africa. These are how people express rhythm. But you are looking at it through the lens of your own culture. Okay? If you go to the south of Iran, where they're a little more warm-blooded, right, their matam is very much more ritualized with movements, with feet work. You know, with body work, you can probably see them on TV, they go down like this and they come up like that. Okay? It all has to do with culture.
Sure.
It's not about boogieing. You know, it's not about really dancing.
Because there's no DJ in the background.
There's no DJ in the background.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying, right? So we have to be much more tolerant of the expressions of different types of Islam through the prism of different types of cultures. And we as Westerners, for example, let's say relationships between the genders, okay, between men and women are quite different to relationships between, let's say, the genders in, let's say, Pakistan, right, or Africa, or, you know, Saudi Arabia. Huh? You know, men and women tend to have a much more egalitarian type of a relationship in the West. And that's our thing. You know, right? Don't come here and try to tell me I should relate to my wife like if she's some kind of Pakistani princess, man. Come on.
What do you mean by that? I mean, so you're saying basically the way you relate to your wife is influenced obviously by a Western culture.
Exactly, right? Now, and look, when I say Western culture, there are aspects of Western cultures that are incompatible with Islam.
Of course.
You see? But there are aspects of Western culture that are not. There's a very interesting concept in fiqh, right? Called mubah.
Yes, yes.
Right? And mubah involves everything that the law does not make a pronouncement about as if it is haram or halal.
Or mustahab.
Or mustahab or makruh. Right? You know, and there's a lot of things in Western culture that are mubah, you know, that can give expression to our Islam.
So if you don't treat your wife, if you don't want me asking, if you don't treat your wife like a Pakistani queen, how do you treat her?
You treat your wife
as a Westerner.
As a Westerner treats his wife as basically as an equal. Right? He treats his wife as an equal.
So you don't patronize her.
He doesn't patronize her. Okay. But while saying so, they both recognize a hierarchy in the relationship.
But it's not explicit. You don't say, "Well, I'm the boss of the house. I wear the trousers."
Exactly.
Because she'll probably end up wearing the trousers if you do that.
Well, they wear trousers anyway. You know what I mean, right? You know, there's the hierarchical aspect is a subtle. Okay, but it is a cooperative, egalitarian type of relationship.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That type of thing.
What do you think the value of reverts is in Islam? Again, drawing on your own experiences and what you've seen over the many years.
Right. I think the value of reverts in Islam is, especially in Western culture or in the cultures that they come from, you know, they provide a bridge by which Islam can cross. The best propagators of Islam in a particular society are those people who have reverted to Islam. And that assumes the society is a non-Islamic society, you know, because they are able to completely understand the psychology of the people that they are dealing with.
Yes.
You know, and they can take that into consideration. And because the Western worldview is now becoming the dominant worldview, okay, the role of reverts in accommodating that worldview to Islam is a very, very important one.
That's a good point. And you've used, I mean, some people have an issue with reverts or converts, you know, what words should be used. Some people don't like using the convert, they prefer to use the word reverts. You know the reasons behind it, as do our listeners. What would you say is the actual definition, whether it is a convert or a revert? What would you consider to be the true definition of one?
Well, personally speaking, I mean, I use the word convert myself sometimes. I prefer the word revert, simply because, for one thing, language is power, right? And one way of having power in language is to redefine things or invent new words, that is yours, that are yours. For example, the black community in America is very, very good in doing that. You know what I mean? Because they're a minority, they cannot fight the society on a political or military basis. So they fight the society on a cultural basis. And so you find that them inventing words or using words in a different context, sometimes negatively. For example, the N-word, for example, is a word that has been an insult that has now become sort of like a word of pride. I don't support it,
sure,
but it's an example of that type of a process, right? Now, revert is very much, I think, is more closer. It's not more closer. It's bad English. It's closer to the Islamic point of view, which where there's a hadith that says, every person is born a Muslim. It's just their parents who make them a Christian or a Jew or something like that.
Sure.
Okay, so when that person who is a Christian or a Jew goes back to Islam because he goes back to that thing he was born from. So I think revert is a much more accurate word from an Islamic point of view. Whereas convert means changing a thing, taking a thing as is, and making it something else.
Yeah, sure,
right?
Sure.
Whereas from the revert point of view, that which is not what it was.
He's going back to
before
his
that.
true nature.
Yeah.
Okay. And just finally, because unfortunately we've come to the end of the show, but inshallah
soon?
Unfortunately, I'm afraid so. But you'll be joining us in the future, no doubt.
Definitely.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
What do you think, a concern of mine, I'll tell you what a concern of mine is, and that is we, if you like, are first generation reverts to Islam. And not always it is the case that our children necessarily seem to always follow suit.
Right.
I'm talking about have maybe the same amount of zeal and connection and identity with Islam.
Right.
Whatever the reasons are. What are those reasons and what can we do to combat it? I mean, alhamdulillah, in your case, it's not an issue because of who you are as a person yourself and your wife, of course, but also where you've been for the last 17 years or so. But for those of us living in the West, what are we going to be, what should we do?
Yeah, being a Muslim is not just an individual thing, it's also a social thing, it's also a social environment, right? There were Muslim slaves who came to America from Africa, okay, who were quite devout, but because they did not have a supportive environment, this Islam quickly disappeared. For many of us reverts, the majority of our families have remained non-Muslim.
Yes.
Okay? And family connections are one of our most primary types of connections. Secondly, the environment that we live in, the society that we live in is not Islamic. And there are very few people like ourselves who we are in touch with. What we have to do is actually try to create a society, an environment for our children to thrive in. On the other hand, the born Muslim community, because they are still steeped in their own cultural idiosyncrasies, our children do not necessarily feel a sense of full participation in their environment. Sometimes they could be just downright racist too, to tell you the truth.
It's true.
Right? So they will not feel a complete sense of belonging. What it really boils down to is for us to establish a more and more powerful Islamic presence, Western Muslim or Western Islamic presence in this environment for our children to protect their identities.
Inshallah. And as I said, Sheikh Ahmed Hanif will inshallah be joining us in the not too distant future on Revert's World, so that we can discuss a lot of these issues in a lot more detail, inshallah. I thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart for
pleasure is mine, brother.
For sharing this time with us. I'm sure, as always, the viewers have learnt a lot. And as I said, inshallah, we'll be learning a lot more from Sheikh Ahmed Hanif in the future.